These are the diseases of the 21st century, the big killers, the chronic diseases, and you know this. So you pick up the newspaper, and there are 3 headlines about some new medical advance. And, things are so much better now. We've got doctors that can fix things, and wonderful drugs, and chemotherapy, and radiation therapy, and surgical therapy. Lifespan of Americans have improved 30 years since the 1890s. How much of that do you think was due to all the stuff that's in the headlines, the medical care? 5 years. All the rest was changing the environment and immunization. Clean water, clean food, less crowded housing, better housing, and prosperity. I spent 10 years in Atlanta as the head of the National Center for Environmental Health, and I worried about really small things like parts per million and parts per billion and chemicals in our bodies and chemicals in our environment. And I worried about big things, climate change and the rest. And in 1999, the head of CDC called all his directors in and said, I'm writing a paper for the Journal of the American Medical Association on what are the big diseases of the 21st century, and I'm driving over there. And I'm thinking about air pollution and water pollution. And the head of the Chronic Disease Center is thinking about the epidemic of diabetes and obesity and cancer. And the head of the National Center for Health Statistics is thinking about the fact that the U.S. population is going to double from 300 million to 600 million in the 21st century. And the Injury Center chief is thinking about the leading cause of death in America is in injuries. And every one of us was thinking about our own little disease entity. I looked over to the right side of Buford Highway where my office was located, and I see an elderly woman walking along. She had reddish hair, and she was bent over with osteoporosis. She's about 75. She had a plastic shopping bag, one in each hand, really heavy. And she was struggling. It was 95 degrees outside. And she reminded me of my mother. And I wanted to stop and give her a ride. I didn't have time, and men don't offer women rides in America. But so I got to that meeting, and we're talking about all this high-flown stuff, and I'm sitting there thinking, God, if that poor woman collapses from heat stroke and dies, the cause of death will be written down as heat stroke, and it won't be written down as absence of trees, absence of public transportation, heat island effects, bad air quality. And if she's killed by a truck going by over there, the cause of death will be motor vehicle trauma, and it won't be absence of sidewalks, absence of public transportation, poor urban planning, failed political leadership. And that's the essence of public health, is we are supposed to be worrying about the causes of the causes of death. The doc writes the cause of death, but it's the causes of the cause of death that you get your maximum benefit in going after. So at this meeting, we picked out the 10 big diseases of the 21st century. Here are 4 of them, and they're kind of what you'd expect: obesity, diabetes, mental health issues, big climate issues, and the rest. And what struck me was we viewed them as different and isolated diseases, but in fact, they were all the same. They were all part of an overall epidemic that was related to how we live, how we design the places that we live, and our lifestyle. They're all part of a syndemic, a weaving together of multiple epidemics. And I won't go through that in great length, but we can come back to it, because the way you treat syndemics is you have to go after the system and not simply the isolated disease entity. So I went back to my staff and I said to the head of the air unit, I think the real issue with air pollution is the fact that everybody's driving all the time and we got too many cars, and I think the real issue with water pollution is we've paved over the planet, and the real issue with injuries is we spend too much time in the car and we drive too much. And I think it's really about urban planning and how we design communities. And, because I was the boss, and I expected them to say, well, gee, Doc, you're really brilliant to come up with that. And instead they said, Dick, you don't know anything about urban planning, and you don't know what you're talking about. This doesn't make any sense. We're not going to spend any time on that. And so I talked to a couple of colleagues, Howie Frumkin, who I eventually wrote the book with, and I said, Howie, I think much of this comes down to how we're designing our communities in America. So I got together with another colleague, and this is about 2001 now, and we wrote a paper, a thought paper, and we went through all the ways that urban design could affect health, and we put out this thought piece And I thought it was really quite a terrific piece. And it was greeted by the National Association of Home Builders, who publicly accused me on the front page of their newsletter of being guilty of worse than junk science. And 14 members of Congress wrote to the CDC director and said Jackson should be fired because he's saying bad things about how we're building America. And my pushback on that was this, which is, look, the purpose of public health is to fulfill society's interests. It's not to order you around about don't smoke, don't eat bad stuff, exercise more. I mean, we try and do that, but it doesn't work. It's about creating the conditions where people can be healthy. It's exactly the role of your political leaders. It's exactly the role of your urban planners and the architects and the designers. They are all public health officials as well, creating the conditions where people can be healthy. We've created conditions that really, in many ways, drive people towards ill health. We have now paved over the area equivalent of the state of Georgia. 60,000 square miles is impervious surface, gets hot in the summertime, produces no oxygen when the sun shines, and runs off whenever rain occurs, carrying pollutants into the rivers and streams. That's the whole United States. Curse of my life are bad batteries. I think I'm going to have to go like this and ask somebody to go to the next slide, okay? Just toggle to the next. Next, please. Hit the button on the bottom right that points the arrow to the right. Is it stuck out there too? The next slide is a map of California, and it shows the removal of our best agricultural land. And one of the things that's striking about that is that all of our best agricultural counties, when you think about them, Santa Clara, Orange County, even Ventura, have really been paved over. What do you think the leading agricultural county in 1945 was in California? It was Los Angeles, that's right, in both quantity produced and value of what was being produced.